Misha Stallworth is a board member for Detroit Public Schools Community District, and Sherry McRill is president and CEO of Northeast Integrated Health. So, Sherry, I'm going to start with you. The program that you have at your organization, I think, is really interesting, but it's also a really critical part of the way that I think we're about to rethink policing and try to shift it away from just responding with police officers to crises, but responding with people who can actually help the folks who are in distress and need something. So first, explain what kappa is and how it works.
kappa stands for Community and Police Partnership and Advocacy. And so it is truly a partnership program, primarily with DPD. We've been partnering with them for over 20 years with the officers, as well as our team, which consists of masters prepared, social workers, psychologists. We have police officers on our team. We also have peers who've been through the justice system. And so it's a three-part program. Actually, we do training for all the officers at DPD when they come on board at the academy. And then we do annual updates for them. We also go into the precincts and do training. We provide follow-up counseling and specialized services for officers. As you know, there's a high rate of alcoholism, substance abuse, suicide, depression, all the kinds of issues that the general public have, but really ingrained in terms of the kind of stress that those folks experience. And then we also have our walk along, ride along program where we're partnered with DPD officers on the street, actually responding to public safety issues. And I think the message for about kappa is that public safety is really a partnership, and it's a partnership not just with law enforcement and behavioral health, but also with the business community in terms of all of those resources being deployed in terms of how that impacts them in our community, and with the potential for all of the violence and the other issues that we're seeing. It really benefits both our downtown community and what we're keep hearing, and what's being asked for by precincts is they want to move further into the neighborhoods as well, because neighborhood policing is the way we need to go.
Yeah. And what have you seen or experienced since you've been doing this in terms of the difference in outcome for the people who are being responded to by police?
Well, obviously our outcomes are, first, number one is safety. We want people to come out without having a violent encounter that ends in some kind of danger to residents. And we've seen that for over 20 years. Working in this partnership with DPD side by side, we've been, walking along and riding along and are able to respond to situations and to help diagnose situations so that really at worst case scenario, these become misdemeanor situations and not felonies. We don't need more people in our jails. We need more people diverted so that they're going into treatment programs or, hospitals if they need be, shelters. But we need human resource deployment, not jail deployment. And so overall, this is an evidence-based program. We've been keeping statistics for 22 years, and we've been able to show a drop in those kind of negative outcomes, both safety and diversion. Yeah. So that's what's truly important to us.
Yeah. Misha Stallworth, schools, of course, are rethinking policing in important ways as well. Talk about what you guys are doing and how you're taking in this moment and the need to really rethink all of that. I'll start here. There are some people who say police don't belong in schools, and that is one of the big problems. How is DPSCD responding to that?
Yeah, I mean, police don't police don't belong in schools enforcing our code of conduct, right? So the whole thing about disrupting a school to prison pipeline is that you don't treat kids like criminals when they're at school. You address behavior problems from adolescents as if they are behavior problems from adolescents, not as if they are, violent crimes, even when students sometimes can be violent. We know that that is a reality. However, it's, part of healthy youth development to receive an intervention at that point and to learn a new behavior, not to be put in handcuffs and then entered into the criminal justice system. So one of the things that's unique about our school district compared to districts around the country is that the police, the Detroit Public Schools police are actually a department within DPSCD, so it is not the city police. And it's an important distinction because what that means is that we have control over how those officers are trained. We have control over where they are deployed. We have control over what their roles actually are. And we have control over what happens if the police are called by staff for some reason. So in other districts, when the police are called, they're calling in external people. They're calling in people who don't know their staff, who don't know anything about students, who maybe aren't trained in restorative practice. And that's not the case at DPS CDPD. What is the case that's similar is that we still spend too much on police. We've increased our spending on, nurses and counselors and deans and folks who facilitate positive culture. But we're working on looking at how do we think about safety more comprehensively within the district? How do we engage in that conversation with our community and our families? Many folks, we're raised to both be concerned about the police, but also to accept that they are the intervention when something happens. And so there are a lot of folks who do think of having police in schools as the safe route. There are other folks who don't want police in schools. So we see this as an opportunity to start having this conversation as a community so that we can think, again, comprehensively about safety. We can think about safety in an anti-racist way. We can think about safety in a way that addresses the needs of our students from a healthy youth development approach, our staff so that they're in an environment they feel good in, and our families so that they feel welcome in our buildings.
Yeah. You've started a task force where you're getting many different facets of the school community together to talk about this and make recommendations. What are you learning from that task force?
So right now we're in the process of getting folks on the task force, and then we'll be able to get started with the work. So I would just really encourage folks to reach out and find out how they can get involved. Diversity of voices is really important in work like this. We have to know where folks are thinking, where they're coming from, what kinds of things they're experiencing, and how we can learn from them. The other thing is that it's by law, this police force has to have an oversight committee. And so for many reasons, it kind of went away over the last few years, just charge it to the emergency management game. And so now that's being reestablished, and we're starting to interview folks for that as well. Very similar to the Detroit Board of Police Commissioners in terms of a role looking at discipline, continuing to make recommendations. And so the other thing that will happen is from the task force, an individual will roll over onto the oversight committee so that there's consistency between the work of those two bodies while we start to rethink these things.
Yeah.
Stephen, I think the thing that Misha said that kind of draws the two programs together, even though our target population is a little different, is that both of the goals of our programs is to de-escalate encounters with the police by making social and behavioral health support, consultation, education available, not necessarily, the kind of interventions that we have been seeing. And the other thing I think that's really important is that we have to have a whole variety of tools in our toolbox to deal with our different populations in all these different situations. So a task force, wonderful idea, because you're going to come with a diversity of thoughts and voices that will then expand all kinds of options to be available.
Yeah. I mean, and the hope is that we can use, you know, our power as a district to make sure that the environment our students are learning in is one that they do feel safe in, but they also feel affirmed in and don't feel any kind of fear. That's just so critical to a healthy learning environment. We know that there will be situations where people call the police. We know that folks are trained, like, again, you know, call the police, this thing is happening, a fight broke out, call the police, right? We see it all the time. And so the other critical part of this task force to me is to say, okay, if we know that that's a reality, then how do we think through the use of our staff in a way that's actually effective and perpetuates the kind of culture that we want to see, so that we're ready for that moment. I really would not want external law enforcement coming into our buildings, you know, when there's a behavior problem with students, or even a behavior challenge with parents, you know, and all, you know, altercation or argument between parents, right? I still would prefer that that is de-escalated, to Sherry's point, and addressed through our school system, you know, within a community that cares for and really supports and knows, has familiarity with the members of our community.